So what in the world just happened around Starfield? It looks like this has definitely ruffled some feathers and has stirred up some major conversation around the game. Yes, the game is now in early access and the reviews are live. And let me tell you what, there's some divisive opinions on the game so far. If we head over to Metacritic, we can see the meta score on PC for Starfield is sitting at a nice 88. That's not too shabby whatsoever. In fact, if we go into some of the scores, you could see how overall it seems like people were really impressed with this game. Critics giving it 100, 90s, 95s. So some impressive scores here. But if we scroll on down to the bottom, there's some holdouts. Interestingly, IGN is in there, and their opinion has definitely stirred up a conversation. Now, if we head on over to Reddit, someone noted this as well. It says IGN, but we take all the IGN reviews together. You can see IGN USA's review is so different from the rest of the world. All the different regions here, France, Brazil, Japan, all giving it a 9. And then, of course, we have Benelux with an 8.5 right there, being the lowest next score. And then, yeah, finally, IGN giving it a 7. And check it out right here. We have genuinely strange to see this. If other outlets like Forbes are confused by IGN's review, I think that's saying a lot. It says a 7 out of 10 is genuinely wild to me, but whatever. Here's to see what you guys rate it as you get further into the game, of course. And we're going to be going over what IGN had to say and see if there's any truth to some of the negativity that they highlighted in the review as to why they gave the game a 7 out of 10. Some interesting stuff here. It's going to be a fascinating read. But yeah, also, we can't forget about this one right here as well. Windows Central reviewer Jez Corden on IGN 7 out of 10. It says, so IGN's 7 is not reasonable. Sounds right. Jez says, I think the review is a bit cynical, has flaws, but it depends on your perspective. The good stuff more than makes up for the bad. And also, yeah, you got to take a look at this one. Starfield review, the best thing Bethesda has done since Oblivion. So you can see there's a lot of positive energy around this game, but is it just hype or not? Now, I also did my own review. Check it out. Gave my own opinions about the game, which were honestly overwhelmingly positive. The game is not perfect, mind you, but yeah, there are so many positives that outweigh the negatives for sure. So yeah, I say we get into IGN's review right now, shall we? Starting out with this section right here, it says Starfield's problems are glaring. Let's scroll on down. It says, it helps that Bethesda has certainly upped its facial animation game for Starfield. Granted, it's nowhere near as precise and lifelike as motion capture performances we've seen in The Last of Us and God of War, but it's on par with other big RPGs where you interact with hundreds of NPCs for dozens of hours, like Baldur's Gate 3. Character models are generally expressive enough that they can do justice to the excellent voice performances. I do agree with that one. So where do the problems come in here? So Starfield's problems, though, are glaring, some of which in ways that are inherently different from Bethesda's other games. I have to say that the early hours are pretty rough going, and there was a while where I was wondering if the stars would ever align. So this review is going to go through that rough patch too as I lay this out. But bear with me, just like Starfield itself, it does get better by the end. So I guess at least there's that, perhaps. But yeah, it goes on to say this right here. It says, the biggest fundamental contradiction within Starfield's design is that while this is a galaxy-spanning adventure with literally hundreds of worlds you can land on and explore, it can feel extremely small when each of them is separated by little more than, thankfully, brief loading screen. The first few times I set out, I really got into it. I'd enter my ship, climb to the cockpit, strap myself in, then watch the cool animation as my ship blasted into orbit. Then I'd open the nav screen, select a star and a planet to set my course, and grav jump to my destination before selecting a landing spot and watching my ship set down in a blaze of retro thrusters and dust. But then I realized that in many circumstances, I could bypass most of that procedure by just going to the map screen and jumping to another planet without even setting foot on my ship. Put another way, while you can walk across an Elder Scrolls or Fallout world without ever fast traveling, in Starfield you can't go anywhere without fast traveling. This is an excellent discussion, of course, but I think it's safe to say that most of the time when you're playing games like Fallout or Skyrim, you are not trekking the entire world to get to a destination. In fact, you're most likely very, very thankful for fast travel. However, with that being said, once you're on a planet, there's still plenty of missions to take on and to stay within that region so you can actually traverse it more normally, more organically. But I have to say this, I love that Starfield has so many options when it comes to fast traveling. I was initially extremely worried that I would have to constantly watch my ship go into orbit, load up into space, then I would have to pick the planet again, and then like fast travel to that planet, and then finally land. I was really worried, but thankfully they do have this option. In my personal opinion, I think it's great where you can actually get straight to the planet, get to the in the trenches type gameplay, which I think some people just might want that experience. Perhaps they aren't going to favor roaming around in space in their spaceship. This game is catering to a lot of different flavors, I guess you would say, different play styles, and that's really important to remember. And that's something that I love in particular about Starfield. If you really want to embrace being a pilot, you can absolutely go for that. But this is definitely not going to be like a No Man's Sky type experience where you're going to be expected to just traverse seamlessly around space. And in fact, I have some things to say about that. I mean, do you really want to honestly take 15 minutes, 20 minutes to go through space and to finally end up at the planet that you're seeking? Yeah, I don't know if that sounds fun to you or not. Perhaps it does, but this is definitely not that style of game. They have a certain pace here that they're trying to go for. Furthermore, it goes on to say this right here. In Starfield, you can't go anywhere without fast traveling. It says, a mission might send you to the other side of the vast star map, but the actual travel time between systems is always the same, and the poorly explained fuel system, which is actually just your range, isn't much of a limitation. When I discovered that so much of spaceflight is effectively a series of non-interactive cutscenes that largely shattered the illusion of exploring a vast universe, it's impossible not to compare Starfield to the way you freely enter and exit planets' atmospheres in No Man's Sky. I knew it. I knew there would be the comparison. And says, so it's a bit of a letdown every time you see a planet, and remember, it's just a picture of a planet you'll never be able to reach by flying towards it. It's something that happens a lot. So yeah, I feel like this reviewer in particular are more biased towards space games that do have that seamless type interaction with the planets, which is cool. Don't get me wrong. What No Man's Sky has pulled off is very impressive, but in the same regard, there's also very impressive things happening in Starfield that No Man's Sky definitely does not have. The level of interaction here that we are seeing with, of course, NPCs, characters, that sort of thing, just does not exist in No Man's Sky, which is not saying that No Man's Sky is bad. Again, they're just different games, and different doesn't mean bad. So we also have this take right here. It says, the next nuance that irritated me no matter where in the settled systems I roamed is the fact that there are no actual maps, mini or otherwise, to refer to when you're on foot. Now this is interesting. It says, all you get is an extremely low detailed display showing you large points of interest such as the mini abandoned research and mining posts where raiders and robots wait for you to shoot and loot them, and the large swaths of alien wasteland and wilderness that separate them. Within a city, there's nothing to guide you around beyond shop signs and text-only directories that tell you what stores are located in which district, but not where they actually are. I'm going to be honest with you, I really do wish they had a more detailed local map. My heart kind of sank when I saw that, but after understanding how they want you to kind of learn the layout of the city and really embrace the city structure, yeah, I kind of got into my Dark Souls type mentality of really trying to remember everything. I still think that it would be cool if there was an update where they did actually throw a proper functioning local map into the game. I think that would be very, very useful. But again, I was definitely forced to be more aware of what was going on within cities and how to get around them and navigate them and remember how they were actually set up. And there's also some interesting guides and little display areas where you can activate them in the city, which actually tells you what the districts have within them, how they are laid out. So then your mind starts really connecting, okay, this is the residential district. This is going to be the more commercial district where I can actually purchase weapons, armor, and trade. But you do at least have the waypoint you could pop up with your scanner. But yeah, that can be finicky sometimes. I notice that sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it it does, and that definitely needs to be fine-tuned and updated. But overall, yes, I do think that they do need to have an option where there is a more detailed local map. But I feel like it might be a mission statement from Bethesda to be like, hey, we want them to really learn the city and understand the city. But yeah, let me know if you guys are kind of like me and essentially forcing yourself to embrace what I would call the Dark Souls mentality of trying to really learn how to explore a game, learn the world from, visually seeing it and understanding it from that perspective, which I'm down for. I've done it before. And next up, we have this one right here. My guess is that this was a deliberate choice Bethesda made to mitigate the fast travel problem, where we're just zipping through the universe without stopping to appreciate the detail, and thought that went into creating dramatically different cities like the gleaming capital of New Atlantis, the frontier settlements of Aquila, and the dingy cyberpunk metropolis of Neon, among others. And these places are fascinating to look at. The reality, though, is that this isn't even how we get around the world today, not since the iPhone rolled out in 2007. So it's exasperating to be in the year 2330 with no comparable navigation tools. I spent way too much time running in circles, searching for basic things like vendors to sell my loot, to while I tried to memorize the layouts of multiple settlements, annoyed that if I were playing after launch, I could have just checked IGN's guides for their locations. The trade-off in immersion just doesn't seem worth it. Again, yeah, this is going to be an interesting one when you guys finally actually get to experience it. Now, it says the third ever present annoyance is fortunately one that stands out as something that can be fixed without a major overhaul. Like Bethesda's previous RPGs, Starfield is a game that is roughly 30% inventory management, and yet it is shockingly bad at that task. To avoid becoming overloaded, you're constantly needing to transfer weapons, spacesuits, materials, and alien goo you've collected between your inventory and your companions, or to and from your ship's cargo hold. But maddeningly, you can't view the contents and capacities of both the giving and receiving container at the same time. You're just blindly dumping things out of one until you get a message saying the other is full. All the while, much of the screen is wasted on an overly large image of an item. It's a bizarre and aggravating step backward from Fallout 4 and the kind of thing I expect modders to remedy within a week of launch. Yeah, some of this might be problematic to many of you, and then some of you might be like, it's no big deal. So I feel like this one is definitely more subjective, though I will say that they definitely do need to improve inventory management. So yeah, that's my personal take on it. It would be cool if they did have it where you can see the container that you're putting stuff into and your own inventory simultaneously. It just makes it so much easier and less time consuming to spend looking at your inventory screen. Now, when he does mention storing stuff in your spaceship, there are other storage options, including your companion. And of course, you could have your own house in cities. And yes, you are provided with your own little space at the Constellation hub space, which is called the Lodge. So for me personally, just having that lodge area, I just dump everything into the safe there. I know it's going to be safe and sound, and it's almost like practical infinite storage over there. So yeah, I have no real problems with that in particular. But yes, it would be nice to spend less time actually managing inventory. And I just wish that most RPGs, again, I've said it before, were like the Souls franchise, were like Elden Ring, where they give you like practically infinite storage space. But anyway, that's just my own take there. But yeah, let's keep going. We have this one. It says, it's also worth noting that the worlds you explore are generally visually different with varying levels of gravity, but fairly barren and lifeless. You'd expect that from planets that are mostly uninhabitable and untouched by intelligent beings, but that doesn't make them a lot more fun to run around. Outside of a handful of scattered outposts, all there is to do is scan rocks or zap them with a mining laser, or sometimes scan and maybe shoot alien wildlife. It's a far cry from Bethesda's previous games, where you generally couldn't swing a dead mud crab without hitting something interesting. And this is, the game advertises to you what to expect from a planet. And for the most part, in my personal opinion, the game does a great job letting you know, hey, you know what? Expect this from this planet. This is going to be a planet that's just going to only offer you resources. Hey, do you want to build a base here? Probably might be a good idea, but don't expect much else. And I'm okay with that, considering that from the core experience, the 3 different core cities in this game and other locations, there are many different characters to interact with that causes a spider web of different occurring side activities to experience. I'm fine with that, so I'm down with that for sure. All right, next up, we have this one right here. There's one part of the main quest that's pretty repetitive too. You're sent to investigate a series of ancient structures, and it's annoying that what you do inside each one is completely identical. The rewards are different and enticing enough for me to want to chase them all down at least, but after the first few, I couldn't help but wish that Bethesda's designers had taken some inspiration from Breath of the Wild when it came to creating different puzzles for each one. All right, so this is completely subjective. Let me tell you what. I am not a puzzle person at all. I think this would be, honestly, the worst idea to throw into Starfield. To be greeted with puzzle after puzzle for me would just be like, ugh. No, please, no thank you. I'm actually grateful that it's somewhat simplified. I do wish it was more varied, but yeah, no puzzles for me. I do remember there was a game, Darksiders 2, which I loved. I still love it, don't get me wrong, but it had so many puzzles. For me personally, it brought down the experience. I do remember some people saying the same thing. That is extremely subjective. So some of you may sit there and go, man, that would be cool. I would love puzzles. Then some of you may just groan about that one. So next up, we have this one right here. It says, it wasn't until a dozen or so hours in that I unlocked enough upgrades, things started to gel for me. Starfield is absolutely one of those games that takes way too long to get to the good part, but the fact that eventually did get its claws into me forced me to jettison all of the more like Starfield jokes I'd been workshopping into space and focus more on what this sci-fi epic gets right, or at least does well enough. So yeah, I do remember before this game released, there were some quotes from Pete Hines, and I'm paraphrasing here, of course, and basically saying that it takes some time for this game to really kick off, and they were really proud of that. And, for me personally, and I played the game, of course, I enjoy the game from beginning to end, let me tell you what. And yeah, some people don't like a slower burn. I myself don't describe Starfield as a slower burn. I feel like it's an adventure of constant discoveries. That's how I describe it. And you're constantly given new gear, new weapons. You're meeting interesting characters along the way. That's what I love about Bethesda games. But yeah, speaking about a slow burn, one game that was definitely a slow burn is Red Dead Redemption 2. And that's a much slower burn in my mind compared to Starfield. And guess what? I absolutely love Red Dead Redemption 2. So again, another subjective opinion right there for sure. I just don't think slow burns are necessarily a bad thing whatsoever. I can go clear back to Assassin's Creed 2 and describe that as a very slow burn. But what happens is you really develop character, you really develop the universe, and you feel like you are a part of it. And I myself love that sort of thing. Now if we continue, it says this right here, file under does well enough is combat, which is the thing you'll likely solve most problems with unless you're extremely dedicated to the idea of talking or sneaking your way past most encounters with hostile pirates, robots, wildlife, and anything else that looks at you funny. It's not bad and has kept me happily plinking away with my tricked out laser rifles and shotguns, but not especially good either. Without anything new and exciting to fill the void left by Fallout's distinctive bat system, gunplay is left feeling largely unmemorable. Even when you unlock some of the late game abilities, it's still pretty straightforward. I think one of the things that's missed out here that's not discussed is the use of the jump pack and the jetpack. I personally love that sort of thing. And the dynamics of dealing with different enemies. Robots, you can take those down with certain types of ammunition compared to taking down more humanoid creatures. That calls for other types of ammunitions. There's difference between laser weapons and more calibrated rifles, and that's something that I personally love and I think ties well into gameplay. You can even slide around, and the jetpack again also makes it very lively, fun, and for me the combat feels very snappy. The weapons offer their own different types of sense of play style. So yeah, there's something here I think for everyone when it comes to combat for sure. For now, we also got to talk about this one here. It says the other side of combat is ship-to-ship battles, which are also fairly simple as space dogfighting games go. Even so, it's entertaining enough to blast away at pirates or to become one yourself and watch the resulting explosions tear ships into pieces. There's some basic power management, where you can divert energy between your weapon systems, engines, and shields, but I never really felt the need to fiddle with that in combat because most ships I bought or found had enough power to go around if I wasn't powering my grav drive, and there's little reason to end a fight until you decide to make a run for it. Unlike the classic X-Wing games, there are no shield facings to adjust, so it's mostly just light and arcade blasting. It's also somewhat disappointing that the in-cockpit displays don't actually function. Your only radar is directional indicators on the edges of your screen. Yeah, it would have been cool if those did actually really function. There are some functional stuff, though, from what I have seen on some of the screens in the actual cockpit here. So yeah, there's that. Overall, I personally really did enjoy space combat, and I did find myself having to mess around with the power adjustments between engines, shields, and that sort of thing. Sometimes you have to get out of dodge and immediately go all in on your grav drive if you need to and get to safety, because sometimes you might be running into a bounty hunter that really wants your head. So I just think that they did a great job with space combat overall. It's not going to be 100% of an absolute simulator. It is definitely more on the arcadey fun side, which I think fits well into what Starfield is trying to be. It just jives well with the overall game design. Now let's get into the final verdict here. It says it's never a great sign when someone recommends a game on the grounds that it gets good after more than a dozen hours, but that's very much the kind of game Starfield is, and I do recommend it. There are a lot of forces working against it, and the combination of disjointed space travel, non-existent maps, aggravating inventory management, and a slow rollout of essential abilities very nearly did it end. It was the joys piloting a custom spaceship into and out of all sorts of morally ambiguous situations in a rich sci-fi universe that eventually pulled it out of a nosedive. I'm glad that I powered through the early hours because its interstellar mystery story pays off, and once the ball gets rolling, combat on foot and in space gradually becomes good enough that its momentum carried me into New Game Plus after I finished the main story after around 60 hours. Like Skyrim and Fallout 4 before it, there's still an immense amount of quality role-playing quests and interesting NPCs out there waiting to be stumbled across, and the pull to seek it out is strong. And you know, with that being said, I just don't think the game deserves a low rating of 7 out of 10. I think that by far the positives with this game outweigh the negatives for sure. And some of the, input here, some of the feedback, I suppose you would call it, is definitely subjective. I've said that time and time again. Reviews are very subjective. I go to the fact that, for instance, this reviewer in particular wants more puzzles on certain parts of the game. I would absolutely hate that. That would actually, kind of ruin the game for me personally. So yeah, you can see how subjective these reviews are. All right, so now it's time to get into your top comments. Remember, leave a comment down below. It could end up right here in a future video, but my most recent video was this one right here, Starfield, my spoiler-free review with all new gameplay. Check it out if you missed it. We have Reed who says this: wow, the NPC's reaction to being shot is surprisingly realistic. I'm excited to see they aren't just static taking shots, but react to the bullets almost like Red Dead Redemption 2 situation. One of the reasons I feel like the combat was so enticing in Red Dead and never got old. Love that will be such an immersive RPG-sized experience. I loved Red Dead Redemption 2, and I was hoping that someone would notice what was happening with the combat in Starfield. And yeah, what they've done here, in my personal opinion, is very impressive with the, reactions when they are actually getting hit. As you can see right there, boom, with the shotgun. It adds that extra oomph to these weapons when you are going through your skill tree and upgrading them. So yeah, I thought that was cool. Now, Fitz goes on to say this right here. He says, I'm really relieved by your review. It's balanced and very detailed. I was initially really disappointed by reviews from IGN and other outlets. This outcome just really reinforces my belief that IGN at least is not to be trusted when it comes to game reviews. Thank you. When I started pulling up the Metacritic score after I launched my video, my spoiler-free review, my heart sank when I saw 7 out of 10. I was like, wait, what? I was like shaking my head. I'm like, it just figures. I cannot get over that. Yes, again, the game does have flaws, but there's so much on the good side here. my personal opinion, this is not a 7 out of 10 experience whatsoever. For me personally, if I had to like put a score on it, I do think that there needs to be some improvements, of course. I would give it like a 9 out of 10. That's what I would give it. It's so good. But anyway, we have this one right here. We have Brent who says this. There are 2 things that I need to know. Number 1, do the enemies become bullet sponges when you get to higher levels? And number 2, if you are trying to stealth and snipe an enemy with a science weapon in one shot from the shadows 10 miles away, do all the enemies know your exact coordinates? I need to mess around with stealth a little bit more. I'm more of the guerrilla warfare type playstyle, but I can make comments about bullet sponginess, which I'm pretty sure many of you will figure out by now if you're playing in early access. But yeah, for the bullet sponginess, that can actually happen. And I will say this, if that is happening to you, you've got to like consider, hey, maybe I'm underpowered. Remember, this is partially an RPG, and you have to find suitable weapons for the enemies that you are facing off against. You'll notice some of these enemies also have like several tiers of shields that you have to knock down. Certain weapons are much better for actually knocking down those shields and getting to the squishy bits. So that's really noteworthy to remember going forward when playing this one. Now, we have Amadeus who says fast traveling, skipping the ship stuff is a really interesting revelation. I remember something from a development interview about integrating disparate systems so they would work together and feel cohesive. Nothing was really stated in the review about the synergy between the different modes of gameplay, ships, shooter, economy. Fast traveling around the galaxy sans ship is definitely not the vibe I was expecting. Yeah, you know, again, you can go ahead and really embrace ship warfare, but to get to that, you do actually have to journey with your grav drive on. Essentially, I guess you would say fast traveling in a fancy smancy type of cinematic experience. But yeah, you know, if you have designed your own ship or maybe purchased a brand new ship more recently, you're going to want to see that sort of thing. But if you're also the type of player that enjoys being on the ground in the mix of things on the planets, you're going to want to just get to that. And I've said it before, I love that they have options here. So I just think that's important. And you can really get in here and trade with other ships, spend some time in space if you really want to. But yeah, there it is. The latest happenings around Starfield. IGN's review is definitely very divisive. I definitely wanted to give my own comments about what they had to say. They did have some interesting stuff to say for sure, but overall a lot of subjective opinions going on here. And yeah, I myself would rate the game much higher score than a 7 out of 10. But yeah, I'm curious to see what you guys have to say about this game once you start actually really exploring it and messing around with fast travel, ship warfare, getting into the exploration of the game, and what you will come back to like you know, my videos and perhaps give a score in the comments. So yeah, go for that in the future. But thanks for watching. Stay tuned here for more Starfield news and updates. I have you guys covered, and I will see you all next time. Take care.